Hey everybody, welcome back to another video on politics, making politics much more easier for the common man to understand. And here, I'm going to be talking a bit more about something uh, I've recently been thinking about, and this comes after J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, went to the Munich Security Conference. This is a conference where multiple political leaders, politicians from Europe, from America, from Canada, all come to this conference to talk about security. Uh, and this comes after J.D. Vance made a somewhat controversial statement talking about Europe in general, and where he accused Europe of being somewhat anti-democratic or being much more restrictive in their democracy. I want to talk about something that I've noticed, something that should be worth talking about, and that is the dilemma of democracy. And I'll explain it in a few minutes, but here I want to take you through three examples that J.D. Vance has mentioned during his speech. Let's see, the first one will be about a Quran burning.
Comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of activist for participating in Quran burnings, quote,
Yeah, there it is.
a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Quran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
So you hear it first, and what J.D. Vance is referring to is this incident right here. If you see, uh, so basically to catch people of what happened, J.D. Vance is talking about an incident that happened in Sweden, where this man by the name of Salwan Momika, which was I believe an immigrant to Sweden, uh, set fire to a copy of Islam's holy book outside of Stockholm's Central Mosque in 2023. And this was extremely controversial, and this didn't go down very well in many parts of the world. For example, um, a lot of people, especially those who follow the religion Islam, were very outraged by this, and well, it speaks for itself. Burning their secret book outside of a central mosque is extremely controversial. And after that, the officers were called to basically arrest him. So the police arrested this man, and he was supposed to conduct trial, but he was later shot. He was later killed. But that's to say, J.D. Vance is talking about how, to some extent, the Sweden is actually um, cutting down on the right to free speech, for example, because uh, Sweden, in the sense, the Swedish police arresting and basically criminalizing a person for setting fire to a copy of the holy book. That isn't really a crime out. That isn't really a crime in terms of property damage or anything, but it is extremely offensive. So in a way, to some extent, while it is the right to free speech, it is also extremely offensive. Uh, and the next one we have is about a praying man.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. After British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution.
So this one that we see here, the incident that he's talking about, is about a praying man, which basically this physiotherapist prayed outside an abortion clinic, and he prayed for a son, or basically a baby that he and his girlfriend had to abort. They basically had to abort because of some reason. But the officers noted this, arrested him, and he was tried or convicted to pay as much as £9,000 in costs. So this is another incident where we see that democracy is democracy can be offensive in some extent, but it also is just free speech at the end of the day. But like I said, this person was just praying. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't destroying property. He wasn't killing somebody. He was just praying. However, this incident is a little bit more. I would agree, or I would be on the side of Adam in this case, because uh, the court says that his action of praying influenced the decision. Could influence the decision of others to take abortion. I don't know how praying would really influence the decision, but the logic goes is that his action is basically influencing somebody or is affecting somebody, and in that case, it would be a crime. Uh, I'm not too sure whether his influencing was ever gonna affect anyone, and this was, by the way, I don't think he was actually really praying. He was praying silently. You couldn't even hear him pray, but still, people thought that his action would influence the decision of others. So it is another situation where you see that, well, free speech, yes, free speech is extremely important, and in this case, I would actually be on the side of free speech, but also at the same time, it could influence the decision of others, like in this one, where where setting fire to the copy of the Islam holy book could have basically setting fire to the Quran could have influenced others and be offensive to others, while it is still a a right of free speech. And the third example we have is him talking about this.
Our
Now,
citizens to
listen to
speak
this. Right, JD then talks about Germany and how Germany is actually trying to ban a far right party.
their mind will make them stronger still, which of course brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election.
So the third example that I want to bring today that JD Vance talks about is this, which is currently happening, where Germany, one of Germany's political parties, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, is a far right party, and many people who you know and who you speak to will say that far right was indeed, and it actually is, linked with Nazism. Right, back in the 1930s, 1940s, the Nazi Party in Germany was a far right party, an extreme far right party, very nationalistic, and in that case, it was also fascist. So Germany is planning to ban this far-right party. As you can see, their chance of success is uncertain, but a cross-group of the Bundestag parliamentarians, led by lawmaker Marco Wanderwitz of the center-right Christian Democrat CDU, is attempting it anyway. On Thursday, 37 lawmakers announced that they will seek to ban the partially right-wing extremist Alternative for Germany (AfD). Together they represent 5% of the parliament, a requirement to take their initiative to the next stage, a parliamentary vote, which, if passed, would bring the matter before the Federal Constitutional Court. So this is another example where you see there's now a debate between whether free speech in this case would be allowed, or whether in this case free speech should be suppressed. On one side, you have the argument that banning any political party whatsoever is a pushback against free speech, is basically censoring free speech, because you're not allowing a political party for whatsoever reason to participate in elections, even though being able to participate and have multiple parties vie for the presidency in a country is the right to free speech. That is a free speech that many people hold. So in this case, banning a political party would be censorship of free media, free speech. But on the other hand, you have people who go on this argument where, well, Germany in the past was Nazi. Germany's Nazi party under Adolf Hitler caused a lot of suffering. They killed many people, and it was an extreme disaster. It was a tragedy. Millions of people died from Adolf Hitler's nationalistic ideals. And so voting for the far right, with this knowledge in mind that the far right and the Nazi ideology has been associated with the suffering of many people, including one of humanity's greatest world wars, uh, in the entire course of humanity. Knowing that the far right is responsible for such tragedy, banning the far right, preventing the far right from being able to take such powerful positions in a country, will basically prevent this sort of tragedy from ever happening, to prevent the far right from being able to wage these massively uh, terrible wars against humanity. So you have one side of the argument which states that, well, based on free speech, this is wrong. But you have another side which is saying, well, we know from history that the far right has been responsible for such tragedy. So suppressing human rights, the right to human free speech, although this is technically wrong, is anti-democratic, is still necessary. And here we see the problem of democracy, or rather, not the problem of democracy, but the dilemma of democracy. And that is, how much democracy is too much democracy, and how much democracy is too little democracy. Right? As we see in the first case, which is basically talking about the same thing, right? Mr. Momika, this person, set fire to the Quran, an extremely important religious icon, religious item to Islam. People who practice Islam. The Quran is a sacred book. It is the good. It is a very religious and holy book. So setting fire to this book is an insult to the millions of people who practice Islam. It is offending them. It is basically you just pulling a middle finger to their entire religion. However, burning the copy of the Islam book, the Book of Islam, the Quran, burning this copy is still human right. It is not destroying any property. It is not murder. It is not in any way, shape, or form something that would call for basically uh, arrest, call for the conviction of someone. So in one hand you have, well, this is free speech, and therefore this should be allowed because it's free speech. You have the right to free speech, and this is a democratic system that we live in. But on the other hand, his action of burning the Quran is extremely offensive to people. It is extremely offensive to the religion of Islam, and is offending many people who believe in this religion very, very deeply. Right, so if you were, for example, if you were the legislation, the person who was to pass law in Sweden on this idea, or if you were the judge of this case, who would you side with? The one who, well, nothing really bad, nothing really violated the free speech, right? There was nothing, there was no murder, there was no property damage, there was none of this that would have warranted a law be used against you. But on the other hand, it is extremely offensive. It does actually go against, I think, some of Sweden's laws um, that actually protect against the offending of certain groups of people, right? So, who would you side with the person, would you side with the argument where democracy is being practiced and this is the free speech, or would you side with the side which is basically saying you can't offend anybody and therefore you do not have this right to be able to offend people, even though it is free speech, right? And we've seen the second one. Would you side with praying for someone? Would you side with the person who was basically praying, doing his own business, praying for his unborn child? Or would you support the argument that his praying could have affected the decision of somebody else who was near the clinic and who saw that and would have instead thought twice about abortion, right? Would you side with the would you side with democracy and say that this is free speech, or would you go against democracy in favor of the majority, in favor of what's best for society? And lastly, would you, in this case, support free speech, basically allowing the far right in AFD to run in the German elections, basically allowing them to practice their free right to vie for the title of presidency, or I think in this case it's chancellor, the title of chancellor in Germany, or would you go against the free speech? Would you go against the democracy in favor of what's best for society and or what basically what they think is best for society, which is the banning of the far right party, knowing that the far right party in the past in history has committed violent acts against many people, including the Holocaust, including a lot of war, including the murder of Jews and all these things, concentration camps. Would you still allow the far right party to go on and win the election? Right, so this is the problem with democracy. Where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between this is free speech, you are allowed to do whatever you want because this is based on this is your right as a human being to practice the right of free speech, or do you go to the extent where you do not get to say such things. You do not get to act this in such way because it is better for the majority. It is better for society as a whole. It's better that we do not have people who offend different types of religions, or we are better off having parties which do not coincide with the extreme right, which was known to commit violent acts in the past. So I wanted to bring this up a lot because this I wanted to bring this up because I think it's a very important conversation we should have, is that there is a dilemma with democracy between whether having unrestricted democracy or having very restrictive democracy. And this is something that I think will be brought a lot more in the future, coming in the future, where there's a war between basically a silent war that's happening between Europe as a whole and America as a whole. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this problem, the dilemma of democracy. Uh, yeah, and so yeah. Hope you guys understand this video and found it very educative, and see you in the next video. Bye.